seen some stuff to do with like slavery in America. I've heard something from Thomas Sowell. I've seen the truths behind slavery and all this stuff. But as I'm building this picture, I want to see what was going on in Britain, the country that I grew up in, that I was born in. I want to see what the slavery, why it ended in Britain. And also, like I always say with these videos, I love to take things with a pinch of salt, get a bit of a different perspective. Because obviously, yeah, I'm just trying to learn some more. And I don't know if it's going to be the best insight, but it's going to be an insight nonetheless. Guys, look, now for those of you guys that don't know, I'm a fellow Gen Z Brit, Z not Z, from the UK. Like, I've got a very curious mind, and I love to go back into the past and check out some of these things, anywhere to do from the history, the music, the culture, the fashion, all of that stuff, yeah, just what the road looks like, yeah. That's how curious my mind is. And if you love how I'm going back into the past and checking out these things, make sure you smash that like button so I know you guys want to see more, and let me know what other things you guys want your fellow Gen Z Brit to check out. And of course, guys, if you want to continue to see these reactions, make sure you subscribe and turn on the notifications so you don't miss another one. And if you want to know how you can support the channel in other ways you can do this will be linked in the description to things like my Patreon and my PayPal for donations. And on my Patreon, I'm doing some exclusive bonus content that I can't post on YouTube a lot of the time, or just extra. So if you guys want to get some more from me and you love my content, then consider to go in the description, and you know what to do. Check out that Patreon. And guys, look, with that being said, let's get straight into this video. Let's go.
The abolition of slavery and the slave trade is often cited as one of the proudest moments in British history. Britain certainly wasn't the first nation to abolish it, nor would it be the last, but Britain's abolition was followed by a concerted effort to end it worldwide. In 1772, an English court declared that standing on English soil automatically made a man free because Parliament had never gone to the effort to introduce slavery legally. Across the empire, the slave trade was abolished in 1807, but not the institution of slavery itself. This meant that people could continue to own slaves, but generally couldn't buy or sell them. The owning of slaves...
Okay. So 1807 is when they kind of stopped it. But then the institution, so people were still trading slaves afterwards. Okay.
The empire, the slave trade was abolished in 1807, but not the institution of slavery itself. This meant that people could continue to own slaves, but generally couldn't buy or sell them. The owning of slaves itself was outlawed throughout the British Empire in 1833, with the exception of India and a few other territories. This, notably, came at an incredible cost to the British Treasury, since they opted to pay the slave owners for their lost revenues. In fact, the British government got into so much debt for this that the loan taken out by Prime Minister Viscount Melbourne wasn't paid off until the premiership of David Cameron in 2015.
Do you know what? I remember hearing something like that, where it was like still paying back slave owners only until recently. Like, that wasn't even that long ago, 2015. When David Cameron was in freaking Prime Minister. And that wasn't even that long ago, you know. So that just goes to show how much freaking the economy was dependent on that slavery. And a lot of economies were, to be honest. Like, funnily enough, as wrong as it was, for a lot of people, that was good business. Obviously, we could talk about whether it's immoral. It was very immoral, but it's to say that was working for a lot of people. And the fact that they were still paying back the money that they owed some of these individuals is crazy. Like, even then, that's wild to me, man. That's insane. I didn't realize that it was like that. Crazy.
Viscount Melbourne wasn't paid off until the premiership of David Cameron in 2015. If slavery was still incredibly lucrative, why did Britain not only end it but place itself into a mountain of debt whilst also further committing to end it globally? Now, there were many reasons, but the first is perhaps the most obvious. It was seen as being morally abhorrent. Famous abolitionists such as William Wilberforce or Henry Thornton argued that Britain had a special duty as a Christian empire to end slavery throughout the world. Another reason for ending slavery throughout the British Empire was purely economic. Whilst the slave trade was profitable, slavery itself, particularly that in the Caribbean sugar plantations, was becoming less so. Furthermore, most of the empire's money was now being made in China and India. I mean, why sell people to the Caribbean when you can simply sell drugs to the Chinese instead?
See, this is what I'm saying. That's another myth that I believe, like, in high school or like secondary school at the time, when they'll teach you about slavery. Like, it's always painted out as, first of all, just like it's just a black people thing. You don't hear about slavery going on with, like, I think there was an Arab slavery thing going on at one point. And it's even before, slavery just existed, just in general. Like, after war, you had slaves. Like, that's just a thing. We don't hear about it like that. It just gets painted like it's just a black people thing and all of that. But even then, on top of that, it's like slavery didn't just end because it was wrong. There's actually people during that time that wanted it to continue. And on top of that, when there's like, the reason why it's seeming like it's saying it ended now wasn't just because it was wrong, but it's because it started to become less economically satisfying, also what I'm like profitable. So it became less reasonable anyway. So not only is it wrong, but we're not really making that much money out of it as we could just doing other things. So then we might as well end it. So it's like it's more dynamic than how I used to think it was, which is interesting. I'm learning about this as I go along, but let's continue.
Final reason was political. In the late 18th century, there had been a large colonial lobby in Parliament who sought to have the interests of slave owners taken into account. With the American Revolution out of the way, the number of slaves and slave owners in the empire was now halved, and so who cared what they thought anymore? After the formal abolition, Britain committed the Royal Navy to patrolling the Atlantic Ocean to end the slave trade for everyone, irrespective of whether or not they wanted to. So just because slavery had been abolished, that didn't mean that things improved immediately for the recently freed. Most either continued working on plantations for poor wages or were simply left to starve. That said, some efforts were made to take former slaves to Sierra Leone, one of the many African colonies set up to take former slaves. Furthermore, Britain was pursuing free trade during parts of the 19th century, which meant that for many, many years, Britons were still buying sugar from slave plantations, not to mention cotton from places like the American South. British India continued to use a system of near slavery called indenturing until 1860, and the empire profited massively from these practices. Britain undoubtedly had a large hand in ending the global slave trade and dedicated a colossal amount of money and effort towards doing so. Britain had given up on the slave trade, but that didn't mean it no longer profited from slavery, at least in the short term.
Yeah, so they were still kind of profiting off of it, like, to a degree. But that's interesting that UK's, the British Empire's role in slavery, which is interesting.
Given up on the slave trade, but that didn't mean it no longer profited from slavery, at least in the short term. The difficulty of this topic comes from weighing up the value of Britain being at the forefront of abolitionism against the fact that over the centuries it was responsible for the sale of over 3 million people. I hope you enjoyed this
Let me hear that again. That's great.
The difficulty of this topic comes from weighing up the value of Britain being at the forefront of abolitionism against the fact that over the centuries it was responsible for the sale of over 3 million people. I hope you enjoyed this episode. And
so interesting to see, because I guess I don't really take into consideration as much as, like, because obviously slavery was like a global thing at one point, right? More or less. To see kind of the British Empire impact, because I'm contrasting it to America, but the thing is, I feel like I need to take into consideration before I compare. America is then again, British Empire versus America's, that's probably more similar, but like the UK versus America, like UK is probably, as a whole, is probably like the size of like a state. Like I gotta think about the US more like a continent rather than a country, because not only does it differ between states, that's what I'm realizing. You guys are also like, a lot of my Americans watching this, you guys are just like, it's a lot bigger compared to the UK. But either way, this is interesting. I feel like I'm building a bit of a better picture. Again, I'm just learning more just about slavery and more in general. So if you guys like how I'm going down this rabbit hole, like, recommend me some other stuff you guys want me to check out as well, because yeah, I think this stuff is kind of interesting, and it's good to know these things as well, because it helps even me understand kind of how things are today and really understand the history of things, because I think the more I do this, the more I'm kind of like, like, this is actually kind of important to know to a degree, because once you know it, it's like, it helps you see things more so for what they are and kind of see the cycles of how things used to be and how maybe that could be influencing things now, because in many ways it's like nothing new under the sun. It's just reincarnated cycles in a more modern day fashion. Interesting. Some people even still say slavery still hasn't ended and stuff like that. I hear stuff like that. But look, the rabbit hole continues, guys. If you've been enjoying this journey, then please smash that like button before you head on out. If you made this point, comment out a black heart for all the slaves that were only black. And okay, that was a joke. That might be a mad joke. Okay. Hopefully only a few people made it to the end to see that. Either way, guys, look, I'm your boy JayFlex. This has been History Matters. Why the British abolish slavery? I can't speak. And for those of you guys made this point, you guys have been absolutely wonderful, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Wow, like, am I trying to get cancelled? That's crazy.